This channel is not intended to diagnose or replace the advice of a doctor. The content here is educational and entertainment. If you think you have a particular condition, do not hesitate to discuss it directly with your doctor. Hello, and welcome to the Disease Channel. Today we will delve into the fascinating and tragic story of the 1918 Spanish flu, a pandemic that marked the entire world with its virulence and devastating impact. Prepare yourself for a trip back in time to understand how the epidemic has changed the course of history and what lessons we can learn from it for the future. The Spanish flu, also known as the 1918 influenza pandemic or the Black Flu, is a pandemic of influenza H1N1, which began in March 1918 and spread extinct in the second half of 1920. Although the first cases were recorded in France and the United States, it was called Spanish flu because Spain was not involved in it. World War I was the first to freely publish information about the epidemic. The Spanish flu emerging in the midst of World War I, affecting a large portion of the world's population. It is often compared to modern pandemics. To understand the dynamics of spread and health responses, the most affected countries include India, China, Europe, and the United States. Once arrived at a given place, the epidemic spreads rapidly because patients transport and spread the virus during the first 2 days of their infection, while not presenting no symptoms. However, in the cases the virus had contaminated from the first week, even before the first deaths, an impressive part of the population was infected. The flu spread rapidly across the world, particularly affecting military troops on the move. This incurable form of influenza causes more than 50 million deaths worldwide, including approximately 50,000 in Canada. The first cases reported in France were in the trenches of Villers-sur-Coudon, but being the parent virus, this mild flu was ignored by military doctors. The first cases of influenza to affect the civilian population in Canada were reported in the fall of 1918 at the Victoriaville Commercial College after the arrival of thousands of visitors to the Eucharistic Congress. However, this strain will be the virulent version, which will devastate Canada. What is the Spanish flu? Basically, the Spanish flu is a respiratory disease of possibly avian origin, which is transmitted from one individual to another, essentially in a respiratory manner, via droplets rich in virus, coming from the coughs and sneezes of infected subjects. Without a vaccine or effective treatment, this devastating pandemic affects all inhabited regions of the world, including Canada. It comes in several waves. The first took place in the spring of 1918. In the fall of the same year, the mutation of the influenza virus produced an extremely contagious, virulent, and deadly form of the disease. This second wave causes 90% of deaths occurring during this pandemic. The next waves took place in the spring of 1919 and the spring of 1920. Deaths estimated at between 50 and 100 million cost the lives of approximately 2.5 to 5% of the world's population. Most of the victims are in their prime. Fun fact: influenza, the official name we give to all our different forms of flu from H1N1 to H5N1, all stem from the Spanish flu, although not as devastating as in 1918 because she has mutated. There were 2 waves of this flu. The parent virus, beginning in the spring of 1918, a relatively mild flu, has reached Europe and Asia. Spain speaks about it first because the countries at war censor information on the disease so as not to affect the morale of the populations. Those who were infected by the parent virus will be immune for the rest of things. A mutation originating from the United States caused the first deaths on September 14, 1918, thus declaring the beginning of the Spanish flu. It went from epidemic to pandemic in October 1918. This flu is first characterized by a very strong contagion, twice as high as a seasonal flu and slightly higher than a simple cold. The proportion of cases of influenza in a population is extreme. Almost 30% of the population was affected after 15 days. It is then characterized by an incubation period of 2 to 3 days, followed by 3 to 5 days of symptoms: fever, weakening of the immune system, which ultimately allows the appearance of complications normally benign, but thus fatal in 3% of cases, or 20 times more than normal flu. It only weakens the patients who die from complications that result from it. The significant mortality was due, according to a first hypothesis, to bacterial bronchial superinfection. but also to pneumonia due to the virus. A second hypothesis indicates that the flu caused an abnormally strong reaction from the immune system. The secretion of a certain hormone, cytokine, in the body becomes so abrupt that it causes a cytokine storm. Instead of regulating inflammation, it causes organ failure, internal and external bleeding, usually fatal. So cytokine storm occurs when a large number of white blood cells are activated, and these white blood cells release an abnormally abundant of inflammatory cytokines, which in turn activate even more white blood cells. The immune system goes into overdrive. Blood pressure increases while blood oxygen levels fall. Cardiac output increases at the beginning of the episode. Then it decreases. Several internal systems go into overdrive, causing hemorrhages. This results in acute respiratory distress syndrome and rapid failure of vital organs, which can lead to death. The Spanish flu had devastating effects on societies, disrupting economies, social structures. The pandemic has caused major social and economic disruption, increasing the number of orphans and affecting families whose main financial earner has died. Businesses have suffered from a drop in demand and a labor shortage. The most likely hypothesis is that the Spanish flu died out due to a mutation of its own virus. A proportion of the infected population was very high, estimated at 500 million or 27% of the world population, from 1.8 to 1.9 billion inhabitants in 1918. This was explained by the fact that it was a new type of influenza virus to which the population had no immunity. An unusual mortality curve, with a peak at ages 20 to 40, particularly around age 30. Fun fact: several studies suggest that this epidemic could have been the origin of a first baby boom after the war, including in neutral countries. Governments have implemented quarantine laws and made wearing masks in public mandatory. The 1918 influenza viral strain remained active until the mid-1920s. The pandemic had lasting repercussions on public health, leading to the creation of committees, international health, and better understanding pandemics. Response measures included quarantines, wearing masks, and closing schools and public places. However, in general, the lack of national coordination between military, political, and health authorities hinders the efforts of doctors, nurses, and volunteers. The pandemic has highlighted the importance of public health coordination and preparedness. It also influenced public health policies and measures to prevent future epidemics. Fun fact: considering the challenges we have faced during COVID-19, we still have a lot to learn. In conclusion, the Spanish flu of 1918 was a global tragedy which had a profound impact on history. It reminds us of the importance of vigilance, preparedness, and international cooperation to deal with pandemics. The lessons learned from this time are more relevant than ever as we continue to combat global health threats. Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope you found this exploration of the Spanish flu informative and engaging. Stay tuned for more fascinating disease stories all around us. See you soon. Come visit us, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for other shows and bonuses. La Chaîne Maladies, the Disease Channel, is a presentation of Lucidius Studios.